All right. Well, why don't we just get started? Why don't you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about yourself and your latest project, please?
All right. I've been in the magical community, I think, since 1979. I was when I was 15, I got initiated by a blind witch in Kalamazoo, Michigan, who she told me we were Gardnerian, but we really didn't follow that. We kind of followed Paul Hewson more like
Who is Paul Houston?
from Mastering Witchcraft.
Okay.
So it was like kind of more old school, closer to traditional craft than it was to, I would say, Gardnerian. And followed that for a long time. Got into Discordianism when I was in the 80s. Loved that. And then in the early 90s, I got initiated into Palomeombe as an Angangalero. And in 2006, I got initiated into Lukumi Santaria as a Alocha. And in fact, Monday was my 18th anniversary of my Ocha.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I interrupted you midstream.
I was gonna say also, like because I grew up in the 70s, um, grew up with like In Search of and Kolchak the Night Stalker and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Loved cryptids, loved
Hell yeah.
normal stuff. And I wanted to do a tarot deck a long time ago, and I was like, never really got around to it. And I started doing some stuff, and my wife was so supportive of me, and she's like, just do it. You can do this. And I wouldn't have done it if she didn't encourage me,
That's
but
fine.
I did. So in 2022, I spent 900 hours painting on Illustrator, and then another couple hundred hours writing a book. And printed it myself I printed like 150 copies of it and sold pretty well. So then I sent a couple copies out to Wiser Books, and they were
Uh-huh.
like, "We want this. This is really different. We've never seen a tarot deck that was based on cryptids and Fortean phenomena before." Uh,
Yeah.
so as of August this year, it will be available. The Tarot of the Unexplained. Oops.
Excellent. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I foresee this being very successful. This is a really cool idea.
Yeah,
Um,
it's real different.
it's very different. Yeah, and man, I mean, it's like who doesn't love like that In Search of vibe? I was just talking about that the other day, and also like Cold. That's hilarious. My brother just bought me the DVD set of Kolchak the Night Stalker,
Oh, right on.
and I was watching. I was just watching the first one where he's like, I think like Jack the Ripper comes back in Chicago,
Mhm.
something like that. It's like these are amazing.
That show was so good.
It was
So
so
ahead of its
good.
time.
Yeah, it made me think a little bit about cryptid. So, do you believe in cryptids? Let me just ask you that.
So what kind of got the impetus for this deck was that I've met a lot of people who have seen them, and I've met a lot of people who have seen UFO or UAP, whatever you want to call them. I've never seen either, but these people have definitely gone through something and experienced something, and they have serious PTSD, and there's something serious.
You PTSD?
What's that?
They have PTSD from saying UFO.
I don't know so much the UFO, but the definite from the cryptid encounters, they
Okay.
are they definitely have like, but the contactee people and the abductee people definitely have PTSD.
Why? Like, did they tell you specific
It just
stories?
shocked them so much, and it was such a traumatic experience for them that they're now like altered and not in a good way. And I wanted to make a deck that was like, there's so many of those like Celtic Fairy Soul Journey tarot decks. I'm so sick of those. And I
Yeah.
wanted to make one that was like, how do you handle traumatic stress of seeing something that is not part of everyday reality and isn't something that we were told exists? So that's what the whole point of the deck was I need a whole new set of suits. I can't use the existing ones. So I
Oh wow.
replaced
Okay.
swords. I replaced swords with ghosts.
Okay.
I replaced cups with portals. I replaced wands with. I was trying to think of something that was like, well, what's stick like? And I'm like, oh, all those Bigfoot people say that the Bigfoots communicate with sticks and knocking. So and they call them knocking sticks. So I just thought it'd be really, really funny to call it knockers.
Wait, actually, hang on a sec. That is funny. So, what is the knocking sticks? There's a bunch of friends
The Sasquatch people, hunters, believe that they say that they hear knocking sounds from sticks, and they said it's how they communicate to each other across distances. Whether that's true or not, I know Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, who's the foremost
Oh, you paused.
what was that?
Oh, you paused. You said Jeffrey Milgram, who's the most, and then you paused.
Yeah, he's a primate primatologist, and he's mainly studies primate locomotion, and he's studied more tracks of Bigfoot than anybody. And he said that his theory is that when they're hearing knocking sticks out there in the forest, that it's probably another Bigfoot hunter on the other side of the hill.
That's really funny. Yeah, that's really funny. That would be an excellent setup for like a TV show. Yeah, it's just what you said. It was interesting what you said. I mean, maybe that's the most obvious explanation, but it's just weird thematically because I was I know there's a pattern where in both John Dee's stuff and in Parsons and Hubbard, they were hearing knockings right before. Maybe even, do you know about this?
A little bit, yeah.
Like they reported knockings, and I don't think that Parsons was aware that Dee and Kelly reported that. And then I was talking to Whitley Strieber like 4 years ago, one time that I was lucky enough to be able to talk to him because on his podcast. And I mentioned that to him because he talks about in his experiences, he would always hear knockings before an abduction experience. And then I just brought this up again because I was talking about this on my YouTube channel randomly. And when he talks about his abduction experiences and you read his actual accounts, they don't sound like the gray aliens necessarily. A lot of them sound like Bigfoots, which is weird. Yes. And it kind of goes along with this kind of Fortean idea that what's actually happening is a breach into some other world rather than potentially an actual physical phenomenon. I don't know how you feel about all that.
I'm in agreement with that because a lot of this, I've read a lot of Charles Fort, a lot of John Keel, Robert Anton Wilson. Very happy to see that you just did a piece on him recently.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I loved it. And anyways, all of them have had the same kind of belief that all these things seem to happen at the same time. And a great example of that is that whole Mothman prophecy story, not the movie, but Keel's book, that you have people seeing this strange thing that they didn't really call it a moth. They were saying it was a black bird at the time. And then you have people getting random phone calls from this guy named Indrid Cold, and then people seeing things in the sky, and then electrical interferences, and then the bridge collapse. And all these things were happening within a short amount of time. And I think that's more the norm than the exception, is that people are seeing something. Like there tends to be UFO sightings around the same time as there's Bigfoot reports, and there tends to be a lot of weird psychic phenomena too at the same time. So I think there's something that's like all kind of converges into certain areas, or just people are picking up on it at the same time.
Have you had experiences with cryptids?
Not with cryptids. I'd really love to.
or ghosts, anything like that?
Ghosts for sure. And I thought I saw a UFO when I was younger. My father and I were sitting watching TV, and all of a sudden we saw something go by the window, ran outside, and all of our neighbors were outside looking up. And so we looked up, and there was this large round thing above us that had spinning lights around it. And it had a weird grinding sound to it. And it was over us for about 5 minutes, and then it left. And we all called the police. We called the Air Force. 2 days later, we hear back that, that was an advertising plane, and it had a rotating message around it. And we're like, planes didn't hover in the 70s. They didn't have Harrier jump jets available to advertising agencies. And that would have been really loud, and we would have been blasted with air.
Wait,
'Cause
so they said that there was they imagined a fictional advertising crap that didn't exist yet. See,
I have Googled the crap out of advertising.
even that is
Never heard of it.
bizarre. Even that is bizarre because it's like, does that mean that they knew about some secret like craft advertising crap? Like, was that going to be rolled out for advertising? It's like, what?
No, it's but
Even that's bizarre.
yeah, and I've been in advertising my whole life, and so was my dad.
Excellent.
Never heard of such a thing. Never.
Excellent. Yeah. That's very bizarre. So you called the Air Force?
Yeah, one of the neighbors called the Air Force because he was a former Air Force serviceman. So he said there was someone you're supposed to call for things like that.
Okay.
But they never got an answer from them. We just got this answer from the police that it was a
Well, the police.
police were said, "Yo, it was an advertising plane." We're like,
Well, that sounded like maybe. Did you ever think that? Yeah, exactly. But like, did you ever think that maybe that was like a game on telephone whispers? Because somebody probably told somebody to tell somebody to sell something to the cops, and by the time it got to the cops, it was like, oh yeah, it was an advertising plan.
very likely, yeah, especially in the 70s when you don't have caller ID, you don't have
Interesting.
you're just a lot of relying on what someone said.
I want to go back to you mentioned people who are traumatized after having experiences like this. Did any of these people tell you specific stories?
Yeah, I've heard some some of them were pretty frightening. I met one person who'd had rocks thrown at them by a Sasquatch. And they were just in Washington driving and got out of their car to look at some deer or something, and then rocks started flying. And then they said they saw this shadowy figure, and they were pretty sure it was a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And they were convinced that it was throwing the rocks because the rocks were too big to be easily thrown by a person.
Oh, wow.
And they got the hell out of there because they were afraid of their car or themselves getting really seriously damaged. But man, when she told me that, you could see her sweating and just deeply upset. She did not like talking about it at all.
Wow. Were there other other stories that you heard as well?
Yeah, on cryptids, I'm trying to think. One person told me they saw Nessie, and I really didn't. I think that one's I really do believe that's a Scottish tourist trap.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed that the shadow of Nessie looks suspiciously exactly like a whale penis? And that's true.
Did that doctor admit that he just put a log on a thing and?
Oh yeah,
the famous photo.
I think so. Yeah, but it's like it literally looks like a whale dick. It's like, oh, okay, we're being by a whale that got into Loch Ness.
I think if they're seeing anything, it's probably a sturgeon.
Yeah, maybe.
I forget how big those things are.
They're giant. Yeah, they're huge.
All the way down their back, and they're massive.
Yeah, and those are in Scotland, right?
There's like they're in Scotland, they're in Russia, they're in the US. Yeah, it's pretty spread out.
Yeah, they're giant. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I mean that sounds like a pretty frightening story. I mean, it's like, but like, yeah, like even if I was driving and watching it in the night by myself and some random hairy dude came out of the woods and started throwing rocks at me, even that is pretty like frightening in context.
Seeing anything coming out of the dark is or out of the woods that you're just not expecting it. Yeah, and then I had one time a friend of mine when we were in college, we're in Royal Oak, Michigan, which is right north of Detroit. And we went to at the end of the city, there used to be this rest home that was abandoned in the 50s called Manor Haven. And we were kind of doing a B&E to just go check it out, And so she goes, "You got to check this place out. It's so cool." So we went in there on a Saturday morning and we were walking around and the place looked like it had just been like left. Like everyone just got up and left because there was still clothes folded on beds and things. And she goes, "Look, there's an attic." So we went up this staircase to this attic, opened the door, got in. As soon as we got in, the door slammed behind us and the bottom door at the bottom of them slammed. And we turned around and we were locked in. And we're like, what the hell? There's nobody here. We kept walking around. There was clothes all over the attic floor. And we didn't realize that, back in the day, they didn't put floors in the attic. So
Wait, really? So I was like,
No, they just had the insulation there, so she kind of like
okay.
walked and took a step off one of the frames without knowing it because there was clothes everywhere, and she went halfway
Yeah,
down through.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I pulled her back out, and then as soon as I pulled her out, the doors just both opened, and we went, that's weird. And we went downstairs, and this isn't really ghostly, but it was creepy. We opened up the refrigerator, and all these old bags of blood that were left over, covered in maggots, fell on the floor.
Oh, oh my
They were
God.
just like a giant bag of scab because it all congealed.
Oh, God, that must have smelled awful.
Not a good smell.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
horrible.
but getting locked up there was a little freaked us out a little bit, but we
Yeah,
didn't see anything at the
yes,
time.
that's wait, where was the blood and maggots from? Like,
They had blood bags probably for transfusions.
okay.
They were literally those kind your
Oh,
hand.
I see.
They were just all congealed, but there was 4 or 5 of them in there.
Ah,
And the inside of that refrigerator was just filthy.
yeah, that's nightmare fuel. So, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I'm trying to think about. Yeah, I've definitely had ghost. I'm definitely most of my memory is opaque to me. I'm not allowed to remember most of my stuff. I think this is too much. It's like that Lovecraft thing about the most merciful thing in the world is man's inability to correlate the contents of his own consciousness. And in my case, in my case that's enforced because it's too much. There's too much in there. So, but yeah, one thing that I've noticed is that quite often, it's like I've been, you said, since 1979, I've been associated with magical people for most of my life. But one thing that I've noticed is that often it's like the super normie people tend to have more experiences like this than the quote unquote magical people, maybe because they're not actively looking for them and they don't have that luster result thing. I don't know. Or maybe in my case, it's just because I never leave the house. So maybe there's some like social issues going on too. That could be part of it. But yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Actually, a long time ago, I met this. There was this industrial band in the northern part of Michigan called Hunting Lodge, and they were really, really creepy, kind of definitely like psychic TV kind of crowd music.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to meet them. And when I finally did, they were all like the most normal dressed guys and I was expecting them to be just like, spiked hair and all this shit. And I asked the singer, Lon, I'm like, man, you guys just look so normal. He goes, yeah. He goes, the way you look, because at the time I had like spiked green hair and stuff. And he goes, the way you look, you are a target. We can do more damage the way we look because no one suspects us. It was like, ooh.
I agree. I that's been my philosophy for most of my life. That was like the William Burroughs thing about he dressed like a banker every day.
Yep.
Yeah, and that is definitely the path that I chose. It's like I remember reading, and this must have been on an old Magick thread or something. I don't remember where it was way back in the day. Somebody said it's like uh, if you will know a skilled magician because you have no idea. You'll never have no idea that you're in the same room with them. And so I've unfortunately made myself way too public. Um, yeah, but I dress normal. So that you feel that strategy works for you? Is that something you've adopted or?
No, I kind of stayed with looking a little, I mean, I know I look like biker Santa now, but look, I don't look as I still wear leather jackets and stuff. I'm just I can't get the punk out of me.
That's okay.
And I personally think it's okay to have a little bit of a look to you, just if you want to be recognized as an author or whatever, whether it's even looking super normal or not. And for me, it was like, well, it was easy for me to grow a big beard. So I thought,
well, it's a different world now.
There's Davezilla. He's got the beard, and I'm tall.
Very good.
That's easy to be, I'm easy to spot in the crowd.
It's a different world now too. I mean, I feel like people aren't really like the idea. People don't have I guess it depends on where you are, but people don't have a hang up about having to dress straight anymore and be normal and boring, like in the 70s or something like that.
Right. And
everyone's a little bit counterculture now.
Yeah. And definitely out here, like Detroit areas.
Yeah.
Everybody out here, we all dress kind of tougher.
Yeah, I bet. In the D.
Yeah, and it's not as dangerous as it used to be. Detroit's way, way tamer, and I mean, it's way safer than Chicago. And
Yeah, what's it like? I've had a lot of friends from Detroit, and they're all, they all missed it, because they feel like it's a place with a soul. But how is it these days?
it's great, man. The art scene keeps growing. They're doing tons of things to rebuild the city and putting all these new things. We keep getting voted like best Riverwalk, and I don't know. It's just a lot different. But yeah, because we've always been such a gritty kind of town. Like one of our writers, Elmore Leonard, once said,
Oh, yeah, I love Elmore Leonard.
yeah, he said
Yeah.
some cities get by on their looks. Detroit has to work for a living. You know, uh, but because that's the thing is we've always been like, well,
That's
we're not
great.
gonna be the pretty town. We're not LA. We're not New York. We're not Chicago. So we've just relied on being authentic and being and standing up for each other and stick. I mean, if you make friends with someone in Detroit, the whole time you were in Detroit, they will watch your back. They will do anything they can for you. We just do that. We watch out for each other, but we just don't really care what's going on with the other cities trend wise and stuff. We're not.
That's great.
Like that. Yeah.
I've been spending more time in New Orleans, which definitely has that attitude as well. And it's a bit that we don't care about what other cities think. And I find it very, very refreshing.
They definitely have their own cultures. So
Yeah, they're in their own universe. It's like their own pod. They're their own country practically.
definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, plus Detroit had like the best musical history in the U.
Definitely have musicians that last,
Yeah,
Alice Cooper's still cranking stuff out. Iggy Pop,
yeah.
yeah.
Didn't Wayne Kramer just died from the MC5? Yeah, it's too bad. But so is there like an occult community in Detroit?
There is. There's a lot. There's like in the northern, I think more Pontiac area, which is there's a lot of voodoo. Where I'm at, there's more in Royal Oak area, and there's a lot more Wicca, witchcraft, a lot of Lukumi. I'm probably I think I'm the only Angangalero. There might be maybe one other here. There's not a lot of Palo here.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of voodoo in Detroit too. A lot of chaos magicians, lots of Rosicrucians and Masons. Tons of we have Temple of Satan's really huge here. And very active.
That's a lot.
What's that?
That's a lot.
Yeah, because it started out, Jack's Blackmore was here. She was I think she got kicked out of the you got to be pretty rough when you get kicked out of the Church of Satan for being too extreme, or Temple of Satan. But she ran the TST here for the longest time. Yeah, they have a big presence here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of evangelicals there or something?
No.
Like, are they reacting against something? Because like it makes sense in Texas, where I'm.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
we don't really have. I mean, I think in the northern areas there's more because like if you go to the northern part of Michigan, it's a lot of hunters and it's very Trump country.
Yeah.
But down in the southeast in the Detroit area, it's just it's a lot of you're either atheist or occult or something else or just don't care. There's not a lot of the churches are really fading out here.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, do you feel it's almost like I've felt this way about several cities, like Baltimore? It sounds somewhat similar to Baltimore a bit, but that aside,
like Baltimore,
like Baltimore.
Oh my God, the first time I went there, I like gelled right away with all the people there.
Baltimore is great. Baltimore is great. I mean, it's extreme as hell, but it's like the people there really. It sounds similar to what you're talking about. Definitely. So, but yeah, it's interesting because I think Detroit was like also the first. It's where the Thelema first hit in the U.S., right? I think it's like Frederickot or the Crow. I think it was the first place Crowley went to talk about Thelema or something. There's something about Detroit in the 1910s that's a key to that story.
Yeah, there's something like that. Yeah, and Houdini died here, and
okay.
There's a lot of weird things that happen here.
That's interesting. Though I want to just on a slight tangent, and I definitely want to come back to I don't want to get too off off your deck and cryptids, but just on a slight tangent. I mean, just letting the conversation flow. you mentioned the thing about like everyone's a cult or atheist or just doesn't care. And that's, I think, something interesting to kind of dig into because it feels like, I mean, it kind of like, I mean, every country has their own occult thing going on. And like, obviously, like the occult politics and dynamics in England really don't make any sense for them. Like, they don't relate to it, like with Austin Spare and all this stuff
Oh yeah,
going
my
on.
favorite artist.
Hmm?
My favorite artist.
He's a great artist. Um, but like in America, it's like Magic has such a more political dimension because of the evangelicals. And it's kind of like, it's a react. People can have it as a reaction, which isn't as much the case in Europe because there's a longer actual tradition. But it's kind of like that thing about, if you're not a right, like basically in America, if you're a Christian, you're basically you can be de facto Christian, MAGA, Lauren Boebert, whatever's going on, like that energy.
Mhm.
But it's kind of like if you're not part of that, what is offered to you belief wise, and it's kind of like a cult atheist or don't care. And
Yeah,
that's just interesting to look at. I mean, like, how has that happened? How do we end up here and where do we go from that?
yeah, I know. There's also a lot of like the Unitarian and Unity churches out here, and I think that's kind of where those people that are like, well, I don't really like where Christianity is now, so I guess I'll
Uh,
go here. And
yeah.
those places are doing pretty well. Oh, I mean, a huge Hare Krishna temple too in Detroit.
Okay.
That's everyone knows. If you want to get acid, that's where you go.
That's funny. I thought they were supposed to be not worldly, and
They aren't, but they always have the.
they always have acid. That's
That's where you
funny.
go.
But yeah, it's kind of kind of like that. I feel like most of my career I've been kind of like rooting around in that and trying to like basically articulate some type of forward identity for people out of that. And it's kind of like it's like, all right, so where do we go from here? We're not happy. We're on drugs. We hate the Republicans. We have piercings. Okay. Yeah, now what? Like we have magic powers.
We're unique, like everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we know magic. It's like, yes, you do know magic. Okay, what are you gonna do with it? Like what
Right.
now? And I don't know if you have thoughts on that. I mean, it's
Well,
like,
that's what I think. That's what I think. Even though I'm not part of the TST, I do think that they do some good work because at least they're doing something to change.
yeah, I agree with that. I was a
Yeah.
little bit like, oh my God, Baphomet statue. Okay, whatever, when it first started. But it's like, you know what? If you look around, in particular this like theocratic hellscape we're entering, it's like I was just looking around. It's like, who is doing anything about this? Well, Satanic Temple's doing something, so I got to hand it to them. They're
Yeah.
doing something. They're actually engaging and directly fighting. So I
Mhm.
admire that about them. I'm not a Satanist, but
Yeah, nor I, but I think
I
that
don't think they are either, though. It's like,
no, I think they're more of a political movement that uses the
yeah,
name value. But
yeah, I don't think they actually are. I mean, I'm much obviously I've been much more interested in like the intellectual side, like the Temple of Set side, and I've talked to Don Webb on this podcast
yeah,
and that, and they're not. They're not. I'm interested in the occult side. They're not. They don't really seem interested in the occult, but they're doing really good work, and they're actually doing work that benefits all of us, and that we should
Mhm.
fulfill and have gratitude for. I think.
Yeah, they yeah, I think yeah, Temple sets kicking butt. And then yeah, I don't know if we have
Satanic Temple,
Temple of Sets out here.
Temple of Satan.
Yeah, Temple of Satan's. Yeah, they're here. They're big here.
Okay.
Temple of Set. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they're
That
that
was
big anymore.
Michael Kino's thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know how active that still is.
Yeah,
I know
me
it's
either.
active, but um, yeah, but it's kind of like it's kind of like the what now doesn't even necessarily need to be like a political movement or something like that. It can be more like what is like a healthy adult identity to articulate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Like people like in the Wicca community. Like I had a friend who actually my godfather in Local Me, my original godfather. He used to be in Starhawk's Coven,
Okay,
and he said they didn't really do magic. They just cleaned parks and rivers and things and did a lot of ecological work, which I thought was kind of cool.
that's great. I mean, that's magic though.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
direct
then,
action.
yeah, it is. I think it's really cool. And then,
Getting together and feeling a part of something.
yeah, definitely. And then, Jason Miller, the
Mhm.
sorcerer,
Yeah.
he has, in one of his books, I think it was in Financial Sorcery, he mentioned working with a coven that has figured out how to use magic on the stock market, and that they were doing extremely well, and all they do is money magic
Yeah.
to own the stock market and push it in their favor. And apparently they're doing really, really well. And he's like, more power to them. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of people try that, and that's great that they're having success. People don't always, but if they're having success, great, wonderful. Someone's all that money's out there. Somebody's got to have it. Might as well be our people.
Yeah, and he said the difference is they took the time to study it and learn, and learn how to be good brokers and everything. But then they use us to just push it over the edge, because he's pretty conservative as far as money goes. Like, he's like, don't ever play the, he goes, I play the lottery once in a while, but honestly, he goes, you have so many people working against you, magically.
Yeah.
That your chance of winning is so infinitesimally small.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be struck by lightning 500 times than you are to win the lottery.
Yeah, I that's interesting. I've really recently been very, very inspired, particularly now because I live in the South, kind of the South. Just kind of the Black community, the conscious Black community, and with kind of looking out for each other, like you were talking about with Detroit, but also like they're so up on financial education, and and have been for a long time. The idea of like we're making money and then circulating money in our own community instead of having it be siphoned out by other people. Like that's amazing. I mean, imagine if the quote unquote pagan community was like that, and there could be like actually like we could have people who would fund TV shows and like cultural projects and things like that. Because not everyone needs to be like a writer or a podcast or in public. Some people do, right? But like you could have like imagine if we had the George Soros of the occult. It's like that would be
right. Or if Robert Bigelow would change sides and stop.
Right. Wait, what'd you say?
Robert Bigelow, if he would change sides, because he already loves cryptids and UFOs, but he keeps putting all his money into the My Pillow dude and
the space hotel guy is funding the My Pillow guy.
He's funding anything as far as extreme conservatism. He puts his money into it. And I wish he wouldn't, because he's so close.
There's that class warfare for you. Yeah. So, but that is something that I've been inspired by, and it's kind of like, it would be great if the occult community could. I've been trying. Maybe it'll never happen. It'd be great if the occult community could be cohesive instead of being like a never-ending PvP realm in World of Warcraft or something like that.
I think part of the problem is that there's so many diverse opinions. I mean, you can't even get two Wiccans to agree on how to hold an athame the same way. That whereas in the Black community, they were thrown into our culture when they came over during the slave trade, and they were not taught our culture. They were not taught it. They had to pick up the language on their own, and they were never taught our financial system because they came from a completely different one. And, most of the Africans that came over were from Nigeria and Dahomey and Benin and Congo. And those countries were more, they were using shells for money, but they were also a lot of bartering, and they just had a different financial system. It just didn't work the same way. And for them to come over here and then not be told, like, okay, well, now you're free, figure it out.
Well, I don't think they were told they were free.
They were never indoctrinated into like, here's how you make money.
I'm not sure they were told they were free when they were first brought over.
Right. They were told
later on.
Yeah, you're free.
Yeah.
Now get back to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely.
Yeah, they were free like those crab fishermen are. That you can make $60,000 over the summer here working with us. But by the way, room and board is $59,000.
Wait, that's a scam? That's a thing.
Kind of. I mean, those guys they do make good money, but they also have to pay a lot of money.
Is that in the lakes? That's at the Great Lakes scam?
No, out in the Alaska. Those
in Alaska. Okay. Yeah.
No, we don't have freshwater crabs out here.
Okay, I was gonna say
just crabby fishermen.
I was gonna say you got a lot of crabs in Detroit.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought all of a sudden. Sorry. What were we just talking about?
We were just talking about money and how
yeah. So that's been kind of like that community's been very inspiring. and
Mhm.
they're super interested in magic also and manifesting and are very good at it also.
Yeah, and they're also the type I've noticed because I'm the marketing director for the largest occult candle company in the country for Coventry Candles,
Okay,
and
cool.
we have a store in the front of our factory that people walk in, and a lot of mostly African Americans will come in and they're like, "Well, I need something I want to use for my um I gotta get my rent paid this week or something like that. I need to rustle up some money." But then they'll also come back the next week and go, "It worked. Praise Jesus. Hallelujah."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even though we gave them a magical spell to do with the candle, they don't see an issue with that with their
Right.
Christianity.
Well, you
Um,
also get like in Atlanta, you get like black power couples with like $10 million homes. And it's just like in like 8 cars. It's just like, how'd you get this manifesting? You know?
mhm.
So there's an awareness of, and I think there has been since the 19th for a long time, possibly forever. But I mean, even if you look at Paschal Beverly Randolph in the 19th century and things like that, there's been an awareness of magic and magical techniques and manifesting and sex magic and stuff like that that wasn't lost.
Right.
And that's, anyways, that's just like one community in America that I think is doing very, very well, and that I'm very inspired by. Um,
Yeah. That's
there's something to
Mitch
learn. There's a lot
Horowitz
to learn.
really pushing all that. Yeah.
What's that?
Mitch Horowitz is really into pushing
Yeah, Mitch is great.
everything. Yeah,
Mitch
and
is
reading
great.
his
Yeah,
books and stuff.
Mitch
Yeah.
is wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, yeah, it's like kind of, if it's like I look at somebody who's like, all right, well, we got this black power couple manifesting a $10 million home. What am I doing? Reading Kenneth Grant books? Okay, well, maybe there's something to learn there. But yeah, that is that's I guess I was just kind of like I've just been was curious your thoughts because I've just been kind of fumbling.
Yeah, I'm always interested in the how like I never used to pay attention to the mix of Christianity and magic because I always just thought they didn't do that. And I was taught that when I was a kid because I was
Yeah,
raised in a Baptist house. I was like, no, you don't do that. That's of the devil. And then I found out, no, it's pretty widespread. There was like the powwow
yeah,
in Pennsylvania, and all the Appalachian people, they have hundreds of kinds of magic, and it all uses like Psalms as the and different Bible verses as their um instead of using a spell.
yeah, yeah,
Bible is
yeah.
Bible, you know.
I
Yeah.
agree, and I think also like practically speaking, I don't think Catholics really make that much of a distinction. They may on paper, but practically speaking, like not really. Catholicism is a magical system too. If you look at the saints and the days and times and all that, so
The Saints are, yeah, and then same thing happened in Lukumi when the Africans were told they couldn't worship the Orisha or the Loa, they had to disguise them as saints so they didn't get beaten to death, you know.
what is leukemia is what is the
It's more commonly called Santeria, but
okay, so that's the
it's
same
actually the
thing.
word. We don't use that word. They use it. Other people use it.
So that's like the actual word for it.
The real word is Lukumi, which is the name of the dialect, and it's also the name of the religion, and it
Okay,
means like owners of selected heads. And it
got
means
it.
basically Orishas pick certain people to be in the religion and certain people not to be, not in a predestination kind of way, like, but more in a I think my godfather said, he goes, there's some people, even some, he goes, you're white and you got picked for it. He goes, there's some people have the funk in them. And so,
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's and that's a world that you know I'm sure we have very different experiences of it. I mean, that's a world that you can't just like talk your way into, I don't think.
oh,
No, and it's like, Lady J, like Lady J Pure, it's like she told me, she was white, she grew up in Ridgewood in Queens, and then like one day when she was what, like a little girl, like Santa, this woman just came up to her and said, like, you have to become you have to become a, whatever the word is, like initiated Santeria priestess. You have to,
mhm.
you don't have it. And she's like, what? She's like, no, you don't have a choice. You've already been chosen. It's like, and then she did. And it's like, yeah, that's like a whole level of reality that I think that
It's
In
yeah,
the same way that you were talking about the African economic system not making sense over here, I think that people from a Western mental background, that's very hard for them to understand or get it. Like I don't understand it. So,
yeah. The religion is completely different than what any Western religion. Their concept of um higher self is very much in line with a lot of things in Hinduism, surprisingly.
hmm.
Um, and the entire point of the religion is you find out what your ori is. Your ori means head, but it also means your perfect double that exists, kind of like the animus or the anima, that there is a perfect version of Jason somewhere. And your
Yeah.
point in life would be to align yourself with that and become one with that spirit so that you
Yeah.
become the perfect possible Jason ever.
Which is essentially like the perennial religion of humanity. I mean, that's that
Mhm.
Sumeria. I mean,
Yeah.
that's yeah,
Where it differs
that's
is
psychoanalysis to some level degree.
yeah, and where it differs is that they have things like I mean the Orisha themselves are sort of they're not seen as gods, even though a lot of people think they are. They're kind of like the way my Padrino described it. He said, if you imagine the universe as a giant diamond, and that diamond is Olodumare, which is the term for God. It doesn't care about you. It's impersonal. But every facet all the way around that diamond is a different Orisha. And each of those Orishas is made up of all the people, places, plants, herbs, animals, weather conditions, geology, whatever that align with that particular Orisha. And all those together form the whole that is the universe. And you're aligned with certain points. So like my Orisha on my head is Yemoya. And Yemoya is the ocean and all the waters and everything in the sea. And um but you also have an Orisha in the back of your head at the medulla oblongata. There's
Huh. Oh, really?
Eshunipako. Everybody has Eshunipako, which is sort of this little almost like a demon that lives behind your head that travels through the reptile part of the brain and out the pineal gland. That is responsible for certain things I don't can't say too much about, but it's because it's for priests. But there's literally an Orisha there. There's an Orisha in the feet, and then there's the one in the head, and then the one in the head is a lot different depending on the house that you're in. When you're initiated, they either just do a ceremonial thing, or in some houses, it's a lot more intense, and there's literally a surgical procedure done where your head is cut open. They shave your head, but no matter what. But then they might put a slice through your scalp and peel the skin back and push this herbal mixture in there and push it back, so it causes a permanent electrochemical change in your brain from this
What are the
cancer.
herbs? Do you know?
I cannot divulge them.
Okay.
Not allowed to, but
But that's legitimate. That's actually something that happens.
yeah,
It causes
yeah, and
permanent change.
it is messed up when it happens, and then you feel the
Wait, have you done this? Have you done
oh
this?
yeah, I'm a priest, yeah, so I had
So
it.
they cut your head open and did this
I
to you?
can't tell you that part, but I
Okay.
can tell you that when the Orisha comes down, it literally feels like there's an animal burrowing into your skull. It's not pleasant. It's not a beautiful
Wow.
experience. It is painful,
Yeah,
and literally feels like your head's being drilled open by something, and that there's electrical shocks going through your body. It is unpleasant, but when it's over, you're like, oh my God, I can see things I couldn't see before.
what do you mean?
I've started seeing people as they were rather than as they presented themselves. It's almost like their rising sign was stripped away.
Okay, so how do I look to you?
Huh?
How do I look to you then?
Like a normal, it's just not as strong now. Let me put it
Okay.
this way: during your first year, when you're on the throne, they say you're wide open. You have no psychic, no ability to shut it off. So you're like psychically open for an entire year, and it is terrifying. It's a rough year, and
So
then it kind
more
of like
about that. Yeah, I want to know about that. Terrifying how, and then how do they navigate that?
because
Oh,
you can't shut it off. So you might see like dead people walking around all the time, and at first it's kind of like, what the hell is a guy in the street? Oh no, I'm just seeing this. This isn't happening. But it's constantly happening. And like there was a person, one of the first people I saw when they said, open your eyes, when the initiation was done, it was one of the other priests who I knew, and I knew she was kind of sketchy. Her husband was a junkie, and she wasn't.
Yeah.
He was probably doing crack or something. Because the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was her, and I went, "Keep her the fuck away from me."
Right. Right. Right.
And they were like, "Who?" And I said, and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, Carrie, you need to go upstairs." And they scooted her out of there. Um, but yeah, it was an awful year. So during your year, you have to wear white. You cannot have any scented products. Your head's covered. Your and when I say white, all white, like belt,
Yeah. Yeah.
shoes, socks, everything. There's
Yeah.
no.
They do this in Brooklyn and Queens. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You've probably seen Yawos walking around like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
For sure.
Yawo.
With the beads and like all the beads.
Mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. For
mhm.
sure. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a traumatic year, and and people are always trying to take pictures of you, and and you can't look at yourself in the mirror for an entire year. So
Wow.
you have to cover all your mirrors,
What
and
happens if you
you're
do?
illegal.
Is
Beautiful.
Candy? What happens if you do?
It I don't know.
Candyman comes
Good
out.
about it. They didn't tell me, and I didn't
I
ask.
was just imagining Candyman.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
didn't want to
and then at the end of the year,
there's
then
a ceremony done, and you're put back to like you're allowed to go back to your regular life, wear colors again, wear scented products again, and be a member of society normally. Oh, you can't shake hands with people during the year. And I was an executive at an ad
I was
agency.
just about to ask. I mean, what did
I
you
got
do?
promoted to executive vice president during my year.
You're
They
still
skipped me
working? Like, were you working
fine.
remotely or something?
I was still going to work, and I would tell
Wow.
people, hey, tell clients, I can't shake your hand. I can in a year. It's a religious thing I'm going through. I hope you're cool with that. They're all like, yeah, whatever. Okay.
Wow.
As long
Okay.
as you get the work done.
That
And
that speaks well of Detroit. That's great.
the strongest thing about the Yemaya's magic for me was that I got to skip from vice president to executive vice president, which
Wow.
was unusual, and put me in the top circle of nine at the agency.
Amazing.
It's like the second oldest agency. Like they're
Which
so
agency?
big. Can't believe all they're like so
Right.
big that they were one of the agencies Mad Men was based on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I worked in advertising in New York for a while.
Yeah,
And
JW.
marketing in LA.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think J. Walter Thompson and Campbell Ewald were the Mad Men basis.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I miss advertising. Um, it's an interesting form of magic. You see it that way magically?
Kind of. It is kind of weird how you're manipulating people to think of things and to see something, and you're changing their initial 400 microsecond impression of something into
Yeah,
something else.
yeah. That's my magical one of my main magical systems. So so let's talk about your deck then. Uh,
Yeah.
so that's cool. So yeah, coming from like a real occult background, it's like okay. So I guess my first question is, did you use the traditional? I mean, you said you changed the suits, but did you use the attributions and things like that?
Some. So I did use like the tried to use all the same astrology that is traditional, but some of the cards I couldn't find astrological correspondences. So then I would look up and see what did the Golden Dawn do and use theirs. And then there was a few cards I cheated on because I just wanted a certain way. So one of them being the star card, I wanted it to be the dog star Sirius because of its connection to the Dogon tribe. And I thought, so I'm like, all right, I know that the star card's associated with Aquarius, so I put the Aquarius constellation in the background, and I also put in the um Sirius, but they wouldn't appear in the sky at the same time together. But I, cheated it for artistic reasons and some symbolic reasons. So did that. Yeah. So a lot of these cards are. I've tried to be pretty close, but I in the major arcana in particular, I took a lot of liberties. Like I don't have the magician. I have the remote viewer.
Oh, nice.
And I don't have a fool card. I have a ghost stalker
Well, that's beautiful.
thank you. Going out into the unknown to
I think
see.
you did the art for these as well.
Yeah,
It's
did
incredible. It's a beautiful card.
thank you. Um, yeah, here's the serious card. And I put the
What's the monolith in the background?
that is the Nomo deck. So instead of Nomo ship, so instead of
Okay.
which is yeah, and I also used that for the replacement with the chariot. And like instead of death, I did a Wendigo.
So the Nomo are just for people that don't know, those are allegedly the aliens that came to West Africa from Sirius.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't do Earth, got to do a hollow Earth.
Nice, nice.
Change the Empress to loud.
The Hollow Earth. It's like the Earth, but not boring. That's
Right.
La Llorona. La Llorona. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
That's great.
Yeah. Put an in instead of the Emperor, I did Indrid Cold.
That's awesome. This is a terrifying name. That name has always freaked me out.
Everything about him is disturbing. Yeah.
It's very frightening. There's something about that. It sounds like a name that came out of a Ouija board or something. Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's like the type of name that like AI would come up with.
yeah.
It's just messed up. Yeah. Yeah, so I switched the suits. So instead of having like kings, I have skeptics.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And so like I was gonna use James Randi for the skeptic of ghosts, but his estate wouldn't let me, so I had to make someone who looked like him. So that if you bought the deck from me personally of the first 150 decks, you get 6 different cards, and what comes out on this deck from Red Wheel Wiser will have some different cards. Also, this deck, I loved how they did it. They like gilded it in silver, and
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's
yeah, they put like the Wendigo on the inside of the box.
That's beautiful. They just have these made in
Lots
China
of-
or something.
What's that?
They just have these made in China or something. That's really beautiful. I'd like to know how they make those. That's really
Yeah,
that's
I know. I don't know where they did them, where they do their printing, but there's foil stamping all over it.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and the books, all the everything in the book is full color, so all the cards are in there. You can't make a mistake.
Very well designed.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that'll be very successful. So it's kind of like, so why cryptids in the unexplained as a tarot deck though?
Again,
Like a deeper message.
yeah, there just wasn't one, and I was like, what about all these people that like, they're not going to get any answers out of a regular deck. Rider Waite doesn't cover things like that.
What's your favorite card that you did?
Of mine, probably the Wendigo,
Okay.
which is I use for the death card.
Oh, nice.
And I did originally one of the other ones. I had the Skinwalker as one of the cards, and I was posting these to Instagram as I painted them each night. Like every time I finished one, I'd post it on my Instagram account, and just to get opinions from people and see how they liked it. And then that one in particular, I get this note, a DM that says no. Like, and I look at the guy's name, and he's one of the chiefs of the Navajo Nation. And I was like,
Oh, damn.
I wrote back to the guy, and I was like, did I get the details wrong? Here.
You go. Okay.
Yeah. And he goes, no. Well, that wasn't the Wendigo, it was the Skinwalker one. But
Oh, yeah.
he said, no, you didn't get the details wrong. It's just that energy is really, really negative. I don't want you calling it to yourself. And if you call it to yourself, you call it to us. And we don't want it either.
Yeah.
So get rid of that card and replace it with a different type of thing. And I'm like, well, I was really looking for something that like could change its skin. And he said, well, I'm sure there's something in your ancestry. So I'm like, what's a little more harmless that would do the same thing? Puka.
Okay. Yeah.
Pukas can change.
Yeah. There you go. That's a good one.
Yeah. So I did a Puka instead. But that was interesting. So that card never made it to the deck.
Yeah, the Skinwalkers thing is crazy. Like, I've seen a bunch of Reddit threads of people talking about like Skinwalker experience. It's always hard to tell if they're making it up or not. But yeah, that's a thing, right? That's a legitimate thing.
That's what Bigelow was allegedly trying to chase out in his ranch, because
Wow.
his ranch is right on the border of the Ute and Navajo tribes.
Oh yeah. I think you just reminded me. I started to watch that reality show and then got distracted after like a few minutes. But yeah, the show about that. That's hilarious. So talk about that. Talk about the experience of working on a deck. I mean, like creating your own tarot deck is, I think, something that everyone who was into this topic has at least thought about doing at some point. Some people have,
Yeah.
or sketched one out. And I think, and like we just did this tarot class with Lon Milo Duquette at Magick.me, and the final assignment in that class is to use all the attributions that Lon has taught, because he's the master, to make your own deck. I'm curious. I mean, you said you spent about a year on it.
Yeah, it was like
2022.
about 900 hours of painting. Yeah, just
That's a lot. So talk about that experience, like how that changed you or your consciousness, like from the beginning to the end. Was that almost like a ritual process for you? And what happened here?
absolutely. And a lot of cards I realized at some point that I wasn't seeing them the same way, and I would go back and redraw them and change the symbolism. And some of them I saw so differently. Like I redrew all those, ones I said that were the knocking sticks with the Bigfoots.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up changing it so that if you laid all those cards out from Ace to Skeptic, it's one continuous landscape. And it's this, you see this one female Sasquatch going all the way through this, experiencing changes and encountering different things, like even almost like Blair Witch style kind of things in the woods that she's looking at that are like, what is this, but they relate to the card itself. And I have other cards that line up. Like I made in the portals, I have two of my friends posed for me as each one being pulled into a different portal. But if you put the cards side by side, they're both reaching for each other, and the cards their arms reach across into the other cards. So laying these cards in different ways, you'll see different things connect and different things have some you'll see it differently than you would if it was just a regular deck where everything's self-contained. I like to think about how the cards could interact on a bigger scale rather than just as one card.
So what came out of that? I mean, do you feel that you have a different sense of like the inner structure of the tarot than you did before?
Yeah, I definitely do, because I used to just really see things in terms of the traditional, Rider-Waite 78 degrees of wisdom kind of straightforward thing. And now I realize, no, you can really go further with these. And also the way I've always read has always been a little more mediumistic, where I kind of like use them as a tool to get it started, but then I just let the head talk and I don't really pay attention to the cards. So they're kind of more of a focusing tool for me, but I know they're not for everybody. So I make sure that I cover, that it's a fully fleshed out deck for everybody.
Okay.
This one in particular, I don't think this is going to be everyone's everyday deck, although some people have told me that it is, because they like they related to the colors and the imagery a lot. But I wanted it really for just, you had a weird experience, maybe you had poltergeist phenomenon in your house, or a rain of frogs, or God knows what, and I want you to help you get through this, and this deck is going to explain it or pull it or something.
Would you say that this is a deck for doing readings after occult phenomena have occurred,
or even during, or sensing they're coming, or something?
Okay.
Feel right. Yeah. So yeah, there's a whole, I changed the swords to ghosts. I changed, the wands to knockers. I changed the cups to portals, and I changed the pentacles into flying saucers.
Awesome. So one thing I'm sure I forget who's, well, it was either John Keel or Jacques Vallée. I think it was Jacques Vallée. I mean, one of these guys had the kind of was of the opinion that the UFO experience or cryptids, things like that, is the same thing that was happening in the European fairy thing, right? And that this is kind of new, just a new, we have new symbols in our collective unconscious to represent a continuing phenomenon. And that's kind of how at least that makes intellectual sense to me. Now, I could walk out on my street and get hit by a Bigfoot. I'd walk out my front door and get hit by a Bigfoot, and then I'd have to revise probably my thoughts on things. But um, my feeling is always that it's like kind of look at it in it's the same. It's this deep psychology, unconscious that's
Mhm.
all of humanity that can even express itself physically at times.
And
Um, but
you just talked about Robert Anton Wilson, and I had the same experience you did with Cosmic Trigger. That book just made my head explode as a young person. And he had a part in there where he said, if you saw a little green man in your yard and you lived in Mexico, you'd say that's Mescalito, the god of the mescaline bush. And if you lived in Ireland, you'd say that's a leprechaun. And if you lived in the US, you'd say that's a Martian. And it's the same entity or Jungian archetype of our brain, whatever's producing it. And we're just interpreting it through different ethnic lenses. And I think that's the same thing here. Exactly what you're saying, that, whether these are projections or archetypes or there's literally something there, is up to everyone to decide for themselves. But I do think we're seeing certain things and using our own local culture to interpret them.
yeah. But the other thing about that too is like if you look at some of the older experiences, it's not like they're pleasant. They're not like Disney.
Mm-mm.
It's like when you talk about these fairy things, it sounds like people being kidnapped, or just, I don't know I don't know if you have any interest whatsoever in tabletop role playing games.
Mm-hmm.
You do? Okay. I am currently having a midlife crisis. Instead of buying a red sports car, I've just gotten back into role playing games. Uh, but do you remember White Wolf?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you remember one of the later White Wolf games was called Changeling the Lost?
Yeah.
You remember this one? Okay, so it's like I just got it off eBay. I haven't played it, but the setup is maybe you can do the setup better, but it's something like it's modern day fairies and changelings, but you are a child that was abducted into the fairyland and essentially sexually abused and then released. And the setup of the game is you thought that you had been released back to the mortal world by your abusers, but then they come to get you and you're back in fairy world with the other people. And it's like, that is the darkest setup for a role playing game I possibly ever read. It's like, so you're aware of this, you played this?
I haven't played it, but I know a friend of mine had it. He showed me the whole thing, and I was like, "Oh God!"
Yeah, it's just like apparently it's people consider it like an artistic triumph, but it's just like but like that. I think that really does get to the core of some of these stories. I mean, it's like you look at like alien.
Changeling is no different than a UFO abductee.
Yeah,
stories. They're very similar accounts.
There's just like this level of just assault and violation to it. Though it's like vampires are the same. It's like you look at vampires. What are you talking? And vampires and werewolves. You mean like sociopath and psychopaths? Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And there's a lot of psychologists who believe that the abductee people were probably abducted or abused by a family member, and they cannot handle it that it was someone close to them, so their brain reconfigures it into a monster or a creature just so they can handle it.
That would certainly make sense. I don't necessarily think that explains
explain all of them.
Yeah. And I
certainly not when someone comes back with animal bites on them. It definitely wasn't there,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that would obviously make sense. But I mean, it does cast light on the fact that, like these are non-consensual experiences. I mean, it's like they're very these are disturbing. And you were saying at the beginning of the podcast, it's like, yeah, people that have had these experiences are not like, wow, awesome. I saw something.
No, they're more of a that was a bummer. It was not a good thing. It wasn't like, yeah, you're right. Disney makes everything seem like fairies are cute and pretty, and they look just like us. And even the Brian Froud books make them look like, they're kind of cuter versions of us with mushroom caps. But the actual legends are pretty awful, and a lot of them are just deformed and the stuff of nightmares, or how we would describe demons too. But
what do you have thoughts on that? I mean, it's like it would be really, I guess, easy, perhaps accurate, perhaps too reductive just say, to look back and say, like, we can look back at all this folklore and history and supernatural magic. And it's like, at this point in my life, I'm tempted to say, like, look, this is stuff that was come up with by people who were probably illiterate, certainly did not have access to the internet, and could not fact check something on Wikipedia. And this is probably a story that somebody told to cover for something that went from one village to the next to the next. That, like, maybe somebody got buried alive by accident and somebody messed up, and in order to cover their ass, they said, oh, they were undead or something like that. And then that went from like between like 18 different villages in Eastern Europe to the point where it's like you got to wear garlic necklaces to keep the vampire from coming after you.
Well,
So
with that one in particular, apparently during the 19th century, being buried alive was a constant fear for people because it happened a lot. And it could have been someone might have gone into a mild coma.
yeah, they had contraptions with a bell you could ring and like a tube you could break through. That's scary. That's scary, right? So it's just like I'm sure a lot of people were waking up and they probably were not happy.
Yeah, I think that's Poe wrote that book. But then again, if you lived in Haiti, I don't know if you ever saw a Serpent in the Rainbow, but that,
yeah, of course, yeah,
by Wade Davis. So the idea was that they would blow this tetrodotoxin powder on you, and you would go into a semi-comatose state for 3 days, where it seemed like you were dead.
And that's real, right? I mean, like that's real.
So,
like,
yeah, that's a real thing. They can slow your heart down to 1 beat per minute, and it's just enough to keep you alive, but you don't register as living, and so that you get buried. But then they know how to come back and get you and make you think that you died and they brought you back, but it's really a scam.
So dark. It's so dark. Yeah, it's like dark when you hear the story, but then when you actually think about people actually doing this, it's so insanely. It's almost worse. It's frankly worse to think about people actually doing that to another human being than it is to say like, oh, they're zombies and stuff. Like it's much worse.
It is.
And the fact that they probably had to go through an experimental process with that to figure out how to do it, where they were doing all kinds of shit to people. Like,
yeah, and those are the weird ones where you wonder, like, okay, did they do this over time through lots of experimentation, and geez, how many they die? Or, in some cases, like, or were they told this through, did an ancestor spirit tell them this? Like, here's something you can do, because they will tell you spells all the time, if that's what you're looking for. And especially the African spirits, man, they're real quick to give you remedies of things and workings, more so, I think, than European spirits, at least in my.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting because I read a study by Tanya Luhrmann. I think her name was Tanya Luhrmann, about people's interactions with spirits in Western cultures versus African.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming you're a Western descent. I'm making that assumption. I may be wrong. I'm assuming you're of Western descent, but correct me if I'm wrong. So, what she says is that people of Western descent, tend to almost always experience contact with, voices, like spirits, or if they have an experience of hearing, voices, right? Or talking to what appears to be a supernatural being, it's almost always negative. They almost always think would think they're losing their mind. But also the content, specifically the content, is always usually very punishing and Old Testament, judgmental, angry. It's like basically when white people talk to God, they get an angry God. And by contrast, people in Africa and India, and specifically Africa, when they have experiences like this, usually the beings are manifest as ancestors who are comforting and that are part of their family. It is not experienced as disturbing. It is not experienced as a break of how things are supposed to be. And I think that's probably the key to it, where there's cultural support. There's cultural support where it's not seen as, we're here. I mean, like here, if you have some experience of quote unquote magic or the unexplained, you're automatically an outsider. You automatically are marked. You have to monitor what you say, or you're automatically marked as separate. And so hence we've created this tiny thing called a culture where we can at least talk to each other, right? But we're still all deeply alienated from the wider culture. And at least on that level, it's like you have a powerful role within society, right? But at the level of but I don't, maybe in Detroit, I don't know, but it's like when you're talking about these experiences, that still marks you as separate in the way that I'm also marked as separate
Right.
from the narrative. And I think it's that it's the separation. It's not the experience, it's the feeling of being separate from other people that produces the negative side effects. And so it's interesting to look at Africa where they don't have that. And, another example I give in that I put in the John Dee book is you can compare and contrast John Nash, who the movie A Beautiful Mind was based on, who believed that aliens gave him the game theory, the Nash equilibrium, and that he was talking to aliens, which is, by the way, the theory that runs the entire modern economy. He said came to him from aliens in the same way that he got his equations. And so he was diagnosed apparently schizophrenic, which he may well have been, and ended his life institutionalized. But you can contrast that with, there was an Indian mathematician named Srinivasan Ramanujan who had an almost identical experience. But he was in a village. He taught himself like mathematics out of a textbook somehow, and then had an image of Mahalakshmi coming down, and which was the village goddess, and unveiling a scroll of all these higher mathematics equations. And that was not traumatic. And people were just like, okay, well, that was Mahalakshmi. Cool. Like it wasn't seen as outside or separate or something going wrong. And so he didn't have any psychological issues from that. So I think that I would suspect that it's a big part of it is just what it does to your position in society.
I think so. I think, yeah, I definitely think like, because, and I'll tell you a good example. I have had, yeah, like spirits tell me, like, treat me like I'm their son, and they're not. They're definitely Congo and Yoruba spirits, but they're like, you're, my child, my son, all the time. They don't treat me like that. So it's not this shocking experience that you would get where it's terrifying. Like, we see if an American sees a ghost, their immediate reaction is, oh my God, and they always say that it's evil or angry, like you said.
Right.
There's apparently no happy deaths in America. And, no one's ever reported seeing a ghost that's just like whistling and, having a great time, or, walking down the stairs. It's always some horribly bereaved or angry person who's been murdered. And even on those psychic shows, I don't want to name names, but I get sick of seeing them walking in the building and immediately going, oh, I feel angry.
Yeah.
Weird here. It's like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, like John Edwards. Yeah. The reason I asked, or it was like you're of Western descent. It was not just like a rant. The reason I said it is because I'm interested in your experience because in regards to what I said with these studies previously, you are from a Western background, and it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you had a lot of experience with Western magic and quote unquote spirit prior to going to Afro-Caribbean. Mm-hmm. But you're reporting in the Afro-Caribbean, hearing them interacting with you in the same way that people from those cultures report. So basically what I'm getting at here is, you can skip ahead if you see the thing that I'm getting at is this actually something that is about are these voices actually something that is culturally determined in your brain, or are you actually interacting with something externally?
They definitely feel external to me, because sometimes they manifest visually, and I've seen just some strange things, and I've read some strange things. More with Paulo, it's even a little weirder. Good example, I was reading a book by Simon Baki called Death and the Invisible Powers, and he grew up in Congo, and he said that the book was his dissertation, I believe. And he said that there was a guy who came to their village every year for this annual festival, and to entertain the children, he would vomit up these little tiny cauldrons out of his stomach, a bunch of them, and they would just dance for the kids. And I'm like, there's no Western equivalent of anything like that for Wicca, or you're like, what? And,
right.
And my godfather told me about a experience in the Bronx, I think, where there was an outdoor festival with some Puerto Rican santeras, and they had made a big bonfire, and the fire department came over and said, you got to put this out. And this one old santera says, no, we're not. And they're like, yes, you are. And we're going to put it. And they just started spraying, and they sprayed out the fire. And she said, No. And she grabbed this sheet and shook it, and the fire burst right back up. And they just kind of looked at each other and said, "Have a good day, ma'am. Just be safe." Left her alone.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Don't mess with Chungo. Yeah.
Amazing. That was Chongo, you just said?
That would have been, yeah, if it was fire, they're very likely doing a festival to Chungo.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's like you hear about stuff, like if you travel outside the US particularly, I mean, where it's like, yeah, again, like I don't know how much stuff I want to repeat on the air, but it's like, you hear about stuff from so many other traditions like Tibetan Buddhism or Hinduism or the Afro-Caribbean ones, where it's just like, what? Like it's like what? Like here, one example is I was in India I was in Varanasi, and I've heard tons of these, and tons of people have told me things, and I've seen things that just don't make sense at all. By just break physical rules of physics for you. But it sound crazy if I talk about it. But so it's better for people just to figure that out on their own, I think. But I did have an experience when I was just as an example, I was in India in Varanasi, and there's all these ruins. There's kind of like the broken temple. There's temples everywhere. And I was talking to a kid who was pointing at the river, the Ganges, and there's like this ancient temple that looks like 7,000 years old. It's like leaning by a piece of just in the shit river with just like the top poking out, just the ruins. And he's like, "Yeah, you see that temple right there?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, that just appeared one day." I'm like, "You mean like the river went down or something?" It's like, no, 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 no. It just wasn't there, and then it just appeared. Okay. And it's like, I don't have any reason to disbelieve him. And, so, but that's just one example of like, you hear about things, particularly in other cultures, where it's just like, or you hear about people seeing things in other cultures where they're not like making it up. Where it's just like, yeah, there are just aspects of reality that Western culture has zero content, like just does not understand at all. I
Yeah,
don't.
I think people, when you get beaten down as a child from things you see, and little kids are always seeing things, and their parents are like, "No, you didn't. You're imagining it. You're lying." And they get beaten down enough times, they stop seeing those things. That psychic part of that's open in every child just goes, and some of them learn to just hate that sort of thing, and others are like, no. I think more with artists and musicians,
Yeah.
because they're more right brain, they tend to have an easier time opening that back up, and they tend to do a little more self reflection and moving into themselves, and yoga practitioners too, that you end up getting this back to this experience of that we're not in one reality all the time. We can shift,
Yeah.
and that there's other realities that are often over ours at the same time, and they might be at a different vibrational frequency or speed or whatever, but every once in a while we sync up and see them, and then it's gone again. And I'm not sure exactly how it all works.
I'm not either. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody does. And if they say they do, I think they're a liar. But
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
we have a lot of theories.
When you have my experience is like when you have an actual occult experience, it's just like, okay. It's not like, oh, let me go to fucking Liber 777 and like figure out all the like attributions of this and make sure it's just like, okay. Like,
Did you ever see the movie Constantine?
yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Great line in that one. He says, "It's never like it is in the books, kid."
No, it's not. It's not. It actually like zero. There's like zero. Like I actually had this experience. I was, looking around. I was looking at my books, and I'm like, there's like 0% overlap at this point. I mean, not zero, but it's. I think I think Magick reading Magic whole books and things like that. It's similar to what you were saying about tarot cards. It's like enough to kind of get you going, but then you kind of gotta ignore them and have the experience you're actually having.
Yeah, and tarot for me in particular is always like the spirits that are around me, the dead, just start talking, and I'm immediately able to just like, all right, I'm just going to say what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people get spooked by it, some people don't. Like recently, I did a reading for this couple. Like, can you meet us both at the same time? I'm like, I guess, sure. And I wasn't getting anything for the wife, and she was also sitting there like this,
Yeah.
little closed off to it, and her husband was like, whoa, whoa. And then all of a sudden I said, wait a minute, I want to stop reading you for a second and talk to your husband. And it wasn't because I didn't want to read her, but all of a sudden I got this. I said, I'm seeing a spirit behind you. And I normally never say this, but it actually looks like Native American. He goes, go on. I said, he's a big dude. Like, he looks like he could take anybody on. He goes, go on. I said, his name is like White. And I'm expecting to hear like White Eagle or something, but it was just, I said, just like White? White? Does that sound right? He goes, my uncle died. He's full blood Cherokee. His name is Hoyt. And I've always felt him around me. I'm like, oh, yeah, he's definitely, how could you, man? He's like right there.
Wow.
And he's like, that was really cool.
Damn.
But you don't get that. You know, that's something like that. You're not going to get out of I don't care how many tarot books you read.
Right.
The
Yeah.
names aren't telling you names of people, the dead around you. That's just comes from being, a good medium.
Right.
Letting them talk to you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that can create issues too, where it's like it's the same with religions, where it's like all these books and systems and tools and all of that and beliefs and gods, etc., are essentially tools to do, I think, what you've articulated wonderfully, which is try to get back to that thing that was cut off. And I think that artists have the same journey too, because it's like they need to get back to that to get their inspiration for their art. They need to get back to the source of inspiration. And I think that this was very perfectly expressed by the now disgraced Kanye, who has the line in My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy, I got treasures in my mind but couldn't open up my own vaults. That perfectly, I think, demonstrates that, the psychic or the artistic side.
You brought up Austin Esmond Spare earlier. He's a great example of an artist who's turned his pencil into a channel for that realm to talk through him. And it's gone past automatic writing to where he's drawing what he sees around him and what he's feeling. And it's like those things where I've seen some similar stuff to what he's seen, not the same stuff, but I was like, oh, I recognize those type of.
Oh, that must have been trippy. How did you feel when you saw? That must have been trippy? How did you feel when you saw that?
When you see similar things?
Yeah, when you see something that.
Yeah. Oh, it was cool. I was like, hey, that reminds me of.
Had you already
look it up later?
Had you seen the thing before you had the experience? Like, had you seen that art before having the experience?
I had his books for a long time, and one time I was really, really deep doing a really deep meditation thing, and it was came out of that book, The Mighty Dead, by Christopher Penczak, and I saw this entity that I was like, my God, that looks like the same thing I saw in one of Spare's drawings. And also, a friend of mine has one of his original sketches, and I was like, I remember the time I first held that sketch, I was just like, God, this is really this guy's work. I can't believe it. And I went home just like thrilled. So I've actually touched one of his works, but yeah, I did see a real similar deer-headed entity that's contacted me many, many times since. And I've seen other people have seen a similar kind of one. So it must be, there's a common archetype or something there.
That's wild. So this is kind of like I'm really curious about your thoughts on this. It's like kind of like one of the philosophical lines that Western magic is struggles with, or struggle sounds too negative, but it's a question we all ponder, and we put it that way, is, we were given this concept in the early 20th century, the collective unconscious, which is a halfway concept, which I think is a useful concept by Jung, but is and is the best, the best concept probably we're going to get for explaining these things to a normie audience. However, is a bit of a double-edged sword because it also essentially psychologizes everything and reduces everything to, well, that's just an archetype, whatever that actually means. So, however, when you get really, if you're, magicians obviously can take a Jungian, it is the easiest thing in the world, not the easiest thing in the world, but it's the easiest approach to magic is to say it's like Jungian, it's a Jungian thing, right? You approach it like Jungian psychology or shadow work or whatever, which is only a half truth in my opinion. But then you get to if you get to actually working with things like having a cold experience or working with, it could be gods, but particularly things like working with spirits, Goetia, for instance, or some of the things you're talking about. It's like, no, 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 this is real and this is external. It's like I had a lot of very, very negative experiences with Voodoo in my early to mid 20s. That there are aspects of that tradition, particularly human trafficking in Africa, that are serious problems, as well as its connections with the criminal underworld in the
Oh
U.S.
God, yeah, Nigeria is terrible, and the Congo is terrible. Yeah.
So you're aware of that too. I mean, I only read about Benin, so I don't know what's going on in Nigeria.
Yeah, so where I would know more about those two countries, because Lukumi comes from primarily the Yoruba people of Nigeria, as well as the Dahomey and Benin, and then Palo Mayombe and Palo Monte, Palo Kimbisa, and Palo Biruma, the four Palo religions, come from Congo region. And Congo is, yeah, they have terrible, terrible human rights violations, and women running for their lives all the time. Nigeria is weird because you have the most educated people in Africa there. They have a high value on education. It's a very metropolis, huge, huge skyscrapers and things, not people you think about Nigeria, but then they also have scams. And, like you've got obviously the Nigerian print scams going on.
Right.
You also have even up to, I don't know if you remember that movie, District 9.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a great.
Yeah, they showed the Nigerians being the ones with the magical scams. That's
Yeah.
a real thing over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely, there's some of them that are definitely hustlers for different types of.
But is that connected? Is some of that you're talking about human rights abuses and things like that? Is that connected to Voodoo, or is that just happening anyways?
It's more political.
Yeah, the thing that I'm responding to, there was like a UN report on human rights abuses in Benin where they said Voodoo is used as part of child trafficking, essentially to terrify kids into. Essentially, the deal is that Voodoo people will come into villages and say, and I could get this slightly wrong, but my general sense of it is some Voodoo people who are scammers will come into villages and, where there's no medical care and somebody's kid could be, somebody could have a serious medical condition and they'll say, okay, we'll use magic to heal you, but you owe us, the price is $600. Okay, well, $600 is more than the average person that is going to make in a year. So you can give us one of your kids. And then those kids end up often as child soldiers. Some have, I guess I shouldn't say her name, but a very famous journalist told me that she saw kids in a temple in Benin who had been trafficked and were used as temple slaves, essentially, and they'd been blinded and their eyes were gone. And then they'll also traffic them into Europe and England for pedophiles. Networks, and so that's pretty dark, and so it's kind of like so basically the reason I bring this up is like how I got on this topic is I had some very negative experiences with it. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that those are ubiquitous for the entire religion.
No, not at all.
And also, my experience is there's no way you can say it's not real. Like particularly when interacting with a spirit, it's like no. That's like something in the room with you, right? So, and for people who haven't had that experience, which I don't recommend, by the way, but unless you're called to it, like you were, I do think you need to be called to that. I don't think you can just walk in, and I assume you agree with me.
I do, and in particular, if you're a Westerner and you're trying to play around with like, oh, I like to worship Baron Samedi, I'm like, you got to be careful with the law because they don't play. Neither do the Orishas, and a lot of them are very easily offended, and you don't know the rules,
Right?
You don't know the offerings, the adimu, and you can very quickly find yourself in a world of hurt from them.
Yeah.
And if but yeah, to your point about the crime, there's always been a crime aspect going on with a lot of these religions with magic involved. Palo, because I'm not sure how much you know about that religion, but
I mean, I've been around Palo people. I've talked to Palo people. I've had Palo people on the show. My initial introduction to Palo was a chaos magician telling me about Palo people they were working with in Arizona who go through the would trap let me would trap and torture spirits and also living animals. I'll just leave it at that. So without
Yes.
getting into some of the grim details, but that was my initial perception that religion was not good. But I've been around Paulo people.
Right. So there are, yes, there's a dark element of where there's people who are digging up graves and to
Mhm.
steal the
Yeah.
femur bones, and then there's
Yeah,
also.
they had that. That's all over Brooklyn too. So
Mhm. But like my Nkisi was super kind. And the only thing she ever wanted me to do was she helped me make the money so I could get made into Santeria or Leukomia because it's expensive.
okay.
Initiation, even back when I got initiated 18 years ago, it was like $7,000.
Wow. Yeah.
And depending on your Orisha, some of the ceremonies are so complicated, and some of the animals have to be brought in from Africa. So you end up.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like people will always say, like, how dare you charge for a magic class or an occult book? It's like that's not how magic is supposed to be. It's like, have you looked at Santeria? Like,
Do you have any? Yeah, do you have 40? Part of that is, you might have 25 to 40 priests who have to get flown up to your house from
yeah,
Miami, and then you got to house and hotel them.
you got to get catered. If you get like catering or something.
You get someone who's real good at cooking for the masses.
Yeah.
A lot of
That's a
time.
real undertaking.
It's yeah, and it's just they don't understand that there's a lot of cleaning. There's a lot of, someone's got to sit there and take care of animals. Someone's got to clean up animal, poop
Yeah.
and stuff and clean
Well,
up.
let alone how much time and effort it takes to create a tarot deck, or write a book or make a class or something like that,
Mhm.
or just spend your life learning this stuff so you can teach it to other people.
Yeah, oh yeah, God, the Odu, which is the divination system of Lukumi, is unbelievably difficult to learn
Is
because
that like Ifa? Is like what's the Ifa?
Ifa uses the same thing, but we use shells and they use this Pele, I think it's called. It's metal chain, but it has
Oh,
16 things that flip.
amazing.
So they
Yeah,
use a chain and we use shells, but it's the same effect. Um,
interesting.
and the shells have to be fed. Um, and they work with Arunla. We work with usually Alagua for the readings, but it could be any Orisha. Um, there's 16 ways it can land, and then you throw a second time, and that 16 and 16 is a composite reading, kind of like I Ching, but so you got 16 times 16 is 256. So you definitely have to memorize those 256 things.
Wow.
Then you have
A
to
lot.
memorize, did it come in Ire or Osogbo, which is, did it come in with good blessings or with maledictions? And there's 21 different Ires, and there's like 27 different Osogbos. And then each of them has 10 to 7 different prescriptions for correcting them. And sometimes you have to know, like, if you got Ire, which sounds good, it might not be good because sometimes it means the Rishis don't want to help you. So they're just going, blessings.
Wow. Wow, they can do the thoughts and prayers move. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, there's even a white boy go home sign.
Wow, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Yeah, there's a lot of yeah.
What is that sign so I can just send it to people on a comment? No, I'm just joking. Um, uh, yeah, I've become more. It's interesting. Africa keeps coming up on this podcast, and I think that
Huge
I,
continent, man.
what's that?
It's a huge continent.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. And they made it look tiny on a map, which, you can read a Freud book to figure that out. But I think it's like I really I'm coming more and more to the opinion that I think both the past and well, let me just put it this, not entirely, but a good chunk, a sizable chunk that needs to be a larger chunk of the past and the future of occult studies is in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
When you realize that most of what Western magic is running off of is, the opinion of British people reading Egyptian shit in the British Museum in the late 19th century. But we're running off of Egyptian stuff. But it's like I bring up, successful Black people that are really good at manifesting. I think they're much closer to that tradition. They talk about Egypt. They have the living Kemetic tradition. It's like, do you see Western Golden Dawn people going and learning from Kemetic magicians? No, maybe we should. It's like, I think that just Egypt is one part of it, though. That's just one part of a gigantic continent.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much to learn there.
Sufism and in the Arab nations is
Okay.
another one. That's a gigantic study. You know, learning.
It's massive. Yeah.
Oh my God! And yeah, there's so many magical forms. A friend of mine told me that Senegal has amazing witchcraft that he learned about. I don't know anything about it. I really don't.
What about the thing where they're like, it's like kind of like, here's the thing, it's like, we hear horror stories about Africa, and it's just like, okay, like this probably is one thing that happened that got generalized to an entire continent, which is like saying, oh, because Jeffrey Dahmer happened in America, like everyone in North America is a serial killer, which doesn't make any sense. But
yeah. Well, Hitler was a vegetarian, so
right. So, yeah. But what I was going to ask you about is, you always hear these things about like persecution of young girls for being witches and being killed, people being killed for being accused of witchcraft. Is that actually something that's going on?
There is, in some of the countries, they do believe that for them, witch is still the word in the way that the old medieval Europeans believed it, where it's like, no, you don't do anything good. You are only doing bad things. And you'll hear about people who are being eaten by witches. And it's like, basically they believe that this witch came to them at night and ate part of their soul and I don't know the mechanism behind that because it's not part of our cosmology, but I've heard enough about it to know that it's a very real thing. And some people don't even know they do it, apparently. Like there's like, you can get accused of it and the person won't be like, I don't do that. They might be like,
yeah,
I don't know. Is it true? Do I do this?
It sounds like something that could get out of hand on Instagram, or like the way that people accuse each other of being sociopaths or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. One thing you mentioned that I definitely, in terms of Africa, that I want to talk about is Sirius. You talk about the Dogon and the Namo.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you've looked at, and you have the Sirius card in your deck. So
yeah, the Dogon have known about that star system for apparently a long time. Now, there's some people that say that no, that's not true. They were looking at that French guy's papers and took his star map, but there's other evidence that no, they've always known. And he may have given them the words to say as far as describing it, but they already knew it was a double star system, and they knew a bunch of things, and they all claimed to have been the normal people from Sirius came down here and gave us information, taught us. It was a lot like the story of in the book of Enoch about how the Watchers, were taught, or these angels came down and taught people different things. It's the same thing. It's the Namo came down, and they were apparently an aquatic race that looked kind of like fish people.
have you read that book, The Serious Mystery?
Yeah.
That book is wild.
It's really weird.
That book is fucking bizarre. And that's like a truly occult book that if people haven't read, they definitely need to. But like the craziest thing about that book is like, it's written in the 50s, first of all, which is already insane that it was written in the 50s, and it's like pop culture, called pre-pop culture alien things, kind of. Well, I guess that's not technically true, but yeah, French anthropologist Robert K.G. Temple went to West Africa, and the whole yeah, and then like the whole book is like this really like academic anthropological thing that's all checked out, which is about like, him establishing that the Dogon people of West Africa had advanced knowledge of the Sirius star system, and he couldn't figure out why. And it's all written in academic. But then like the last part is a short story that he just threw in about squid people coming down from space. And he's like, this is probably what happened, but maybe it's just a short story. And so it's just like, that's what he actually thought happened, but he just put it in this insane story in the end to preserve his academic thing. And it's like, what the hell is this?
I liked it because it was like, I really like traditional witchcraft, and that's all based on folklore. So I loved reading. That was like, that's so cool. He's got folklore.
Wild, right?
Serious. We need more folklore about aliens.
One thing that I used to talk to Genesis about this a lot, and Jen used to talk to Timothy Wiley about this a lot. And one thing that I think either I said or Timothy Wiley said or Jen said, but it was an opinion that apparently was shared by all of us, is that the aliens from Sirius are dolphins.
Are dolphins?
When they're talking about half aquatic, half mammal, people who came down, it's dolphins. It's a theory.
It's not a bad one. I mean, dolphins have basically the same brains we do,
Yeah.
possibly.
I mean, you could see dolphins as being, so let me put it this way. If you want to go off on the hypothesis that human beings were genetically engineered to be smarter than monkeys, why wouldn't dolphins be genetically engineered to be smarter than other marine mammals
Mm-hmm.
or fish? Why would we have been, if aliens boosted our intelligence, were we the only species? Probably not.
And if nothing else, it fits in with Douglas Adams books.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to think about, right? Who
Oh,
knows?
I like it. Yeah.
But that is what, and one thing that Jen said is that I think, because Jen was convinced that Jen went to Benin at the end of her life and was convinced that Benin was the Voodoo tradition, and Dahomey, West Africa, was not only going to explain a lot of the Western tradition, which Jen was not particularly interested in at all, but was much more, was also interested in, thought that would have information about aliens. And one thing that Jen, I think, heard from a priest in Benin, a Dahomey priest that Jen was working with, was that, or maybe this is from, I could be getting this wrong, but was it the reason that or maybe it was just Jen's theory, the reason why the Dogon had advanced knowledge of Sirius is because they were the descendants of the astronomers from Egypt who went west. Why Jen had this theory, I don't know, but that essentially like that knowledge, and we know, I think, what's his name? One of these forbidden archaeology people
Mm-hmm.
showed that the pyramids are built in alignment with Orion, of which Sirius is a part, and that the Egyptians tracked Sirius to predict the flooding of the Nile, and that the pyramids were part of that. And so since they had this, the Egyptians had this advanced astronomical knowledge of Sirius because they used it for planting crops. And the idea was that potentially the Dogon had brought that knowledge from Egypt one way or another.
Or maybe it was the other way around too. They might have given it to the Egyptians.
Possible, yeah, it's possible.
That doesn't surprise me because there was a similar theory about the Yoruba people. There used to be a tribe in Egypt called the Yarba, and the Yarba had very similar artwork to the Egyptians and super realistic sculpture work and everything. And they were not that, but they didn't follow the same gods. And that one of the pharaohs, and I do not know which one it was, and I don't want to just say, oh, it was Chaos 2 or something and be wrong. So I'm just going to say one of them kicked them out, and they traveled across the deserts and went southwest till they hit the ocean and became the Yoruba. And if you look throughout African artwork, it's very abstract, very unusual flat shapes and things, with two exceptions. Not Arabia. As I say, the Egyptians have very realistic art on the same level as Rome, and the Yoruba.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yoruba sculpture, you could recognize these people on the street. If you ever type up Yoruba sculpture, you will
Yeah.
gorgeous bronzes, and they
Wait, who did the elongated head sculptures? Was that
a couple of them.
was that the Yoruba also?
Sonye and Fang and
So that's not Yoruba.
no, the Yorubas were pretty real.
Okay.
Their stuff looks pretty realistic.
Okay.
There's a few things that are a little abstract, like some of the there's sometimes they'll do like almost a dwarfism type of proportion for effect. Like you'll see some Yamaya and Elegua statues where they have like super exaggerated breasts on here, or huge head or huge feet or something, but it's more, I think it's more decorative than it is a style. But yeah, the Sonye is another interesting tribe. They have really creepy magic, and they will capture pygmies because they believe the pygmies being the best hunters in the forest. So they would take their fingers and put them inside their fetish dolls.
What the hell? That's the thing. It's like sympathetic magic, right? It's like you read about it in a book and it sounds cool, and then it's just like, wait a minute.
It follows that way too. I don't know this person, but I know through another Palero. There's a Palero in apparently in Vegas, or was that.
That's a wildlife. That's okay.
Yeah,
I don't want to derail that, but that's a hilarious role playing game character cons. It's like you rolled like college practitioner in Vegas.
Yeah.
It's like you win at the most extreme character cat class creation. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, with this, apparently this guy has dug up Geronimo's bones and has Geronimo's bones in his prenda. Like, you want to talk about
Of course, yeah.
terrifying magic?
What does he do with Geronimo's bones?
Probably uses it for all kinds of nefarious things. Because a lot of there are some paleros that got in it just for power,
Yeah.
and you'll see them working with drug dealers and helping them escape jail. And um,
Have you seen a lot of that? Looked at that stuff in Miami. There's a lot of
oh
that
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of them that help the coke dealers and
What have you seen? What did you see or hear about?
I've just heard that there's some shady paleros and santeros that'll try and help people um get out of drug dealers, get out of jail. But the problem is, like, Orisha's like, Ochosi is one of the Orishas you have to get, and Ochosi is the law, and he does not play. He doesn't care what you did. If you did something that's against the law, he's going to make you pay for it.
So
So
what about when you hear about people who get protection from the law so that they can do things like dig
yeah, I
up?
don't know how they do it, because Ochosi is a law, and Ochosi would be like, no.
So in your experience is actually the opposite. Your experience of it is that it's actually very
Well, some of the Palo spirits can be very amoral and not care.
okay.
And will do what you want as long as you feed them. But the Orishas have a definite sense of morality. A lot of them. There's not a lot of Orishas I can think of that would turn a blind eye to something bad.
Yeah, what was always told to me by Santeros is, yeah, it's like Santeria, like that's working with the Orisha, that's basically light side, that's fine. Don't mess with color, that's the dark side, that's abusing it. But then I talked to Paula people who say no, this is actually its own religion.
Yeah. I look at it this way: if you want to feel good, talk to your Orishas. If you want to get something done, talk to your Prenda.
Okay, I see. That's
Your Prenda work on your Prendas tend to be, those type of spirits, Yankisi, they work on the more material level, whereas the Orishas are more about like elevating you, and they'll help you on the material level, but not with the speed that a Prenda would.
So I'm interested in, I was very interested, you said something, the things that were similar to other traditions. Like you talked about the head, and that sounds similar to some stuff in Hinduism, but you talked about different Orisha. It almost sounded like the chakra system, or having different Orisha in the chakras, or perhaps not.
Not every place, but
Okay.
yeah, definitely Ori and Eshu Nipako, which is the medulla oblongata, and then your feet. There's an Eshu of your feet.
So that I guess my question is, I'm curious about the things that are overlaps with other magical systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm even more curious about what are the experiences or things that you had in that have like perhaps no overlap even with Western reality or Western magic. What's like totally out of left field in there?
I have seen stuff like that where I'm just like, I don't know the equivalent of this in like witchcraft or another system. Maybe, well, no, even posturing, I think there's a reason for that. I was told that some of the postures we take are there specifically to take you out of your comfort level. Um, oh, I know. I know Wiccans will dance at like a maypole or things like that, and they'll claim it's just ecstatic, but it's nothing like when you are at a tambor and there are people, bata players. There's usually three drummers. Each one has a different type of drum, and each of those drums has an actual Orisha living in it. And those, when they play certain patterns to bring down the Orishas, um, it's really strange because people will start dancing a certain way from the Orisha pulling on them, and then the drummers, when they notice it, will subtly change the beat in a way that we don't necessarily hear it. but the Orisha recognizes it, and either as it could be taunting the Orisha to make them come down faster, or it could be a beat that is telling them to hold off. And if you see someone actually responding properly in the way they're dancing, then they're probably about to get mounted. And I don't see that in any other system where dance is used as a vehicle for pulling in a mount, for getting a god in your head, showing up. And sometimes those mounts will sit in you for 3 days until if they have something to say to everybody.
Wow. Yeah, that for me, I was unprepared for how real that actually is. Like it's real because I had so much experience with like assumption of God forms and invocation and even full possession trance. Like it's actually something I'm really good at. But that's not the same as feeling like it's kind of like what you were saying about feeling an animal burrowing into your head. There's nothing that extreme, but like feeling another being enter your body that is clearly not you, is not some like complex or sublayer or aspect or archetype or something from the collective unconscious. It's something entering your body that was not a pleasant experience, and it did not feel natural, and it did not feel it was something that I was supposed to be doing. It felt very, very dangerous.
The first time it happened to me, I was at a ceremony for Egun, for the dead, and there's a thing called the Palo Muerte, the stick of the dead, and they were like, Dave, can you take the stick and do the beat? So you're basically doing a kind of a 4/4 beat. And I remember, pounding this thing while they're praying. And then all of a sudden my vision kind of went out like a little, like the old television tubes, like went down to a little dot of light, and then it was gone. And I heard this sound like I was being pulled underwater, like this rushing water in my ears, and then nothing. And then I remember waking up and I was in another person's room and they were blowing cigar smoke in my ear to wake me up. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? And they're like, oh, the Egun tried to take you while you were drumming. And my brother was at that ceremony. He goes, dude, you were like flopping like a fish on the ground. And so I asked my padrino, I'm like, why do we do that? Why do people, when they start to get possessed, flop like a fish? And he goes, because for a few seconds, nothing's controlling your motor functions. You got two different entities in there vying for control of the body. And for a few seconds, nothing's controlling motor functions. Your body is just like tripping out. And
that's actually fairly disturbing, because I had a similar experience, which is being at an altar with a Udon practitioner, blacking out and waking up in the corner of another room with no recollection of what had happened. For obvious reasons, that was deeply, deeply disturbing, and I was not told that was going to happen or could happen.
Right.
That was deeply disturbing for obvious reasons.
I didn't know what it was like to be possessed either. No one had ever told me. I just heard that it happens. But
then there's also times where I've done it, particularly there's also times where I was doing it particularly on my own, where I would get just yanked and possessed, and it was just like, this is horrible. Like everything felt wrong and off. Like it was, but that I had consciousness of. I didn't black out or anything like that.
Yeah, the Orishas don't come down readily. Well, with some mounts they do, but usually the experience has to be exact with the drumming and everything. But I've heard of that the Loa in voodoo will come down a lot easier. And a friend of mine in Chicago, she told me she's a Santera and a Palera and a Mambo, and she said that she was just driving one day and Loa tried to possess her while she was driving, and she's like, I'm gonna fucking crash.
She was, yeah.
Like, oh my God, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it felt like,
but they feel like it.
Yeah, it felt like something seriously neurological was going on. Maybe we could produce a seizure, who knows? But I think my basic feeling I've been around a lot of voodoo and Santeria people, particularly Santeria people, which I think is mostly positive. I have great respect for it. It's not for me. But I have respect for it, and I think part of my respect for it is not approaching it or thinking that like that's just another thing to add to my spiritual materialism collection. Let me put it that. Yeah, so
it's very different, and if you're not, It's not just like you can, I don't know, like I know a lot of Wiccans who like seem to be deity of the week.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like you can't do that with these entities.
No,
They don't think the same way, and that is not your culture, and they will not respect you or the same way. Or yeah, it's just not that.
I think there's a lot to learn there though, because that's something we could learn from. Because I think the deity of the week thing, it's like, chaos magicians are probably even more so because it's kind of like, what do I want? Okay, well, what god does that correspond with? Okay, call up the god. Give me the thing. It's like, okay, I did. I'm high. You know,
Yeah,
you have to give me the thing because I'm really high. It's like that doesn't.
yeah,
And so I think there's a lot, but that comes from, I think, the assumption that they're not real. And that's not an assumption you can make with the Afro-Caribbean things.
no,
It's much
you
more
feel it
one
like a
thing.
slap in the face. Yeah,
That relationship aspect, I think, is something that Western practitioners really need to learn. And that can be like, you know what? I'm actually not ready for that relationship, and that's fine. You know, but to understand what it is, and then
Mhm.
when you're interacting with these beings, it's not just give me what I want, call them up and tell me, give me what I want.
Yeah, I feel like some of the Western magical systems are kind of like understanding a good in joke or getting the subtlety out of someone's painting.
Mm,
But the African stuff is like you just got hit with a cannon. There's no messing around. There's no subtlety.
yeah, I
No
like that.
playing, it's just like, what the hell was that?
Well, in a similar way, like the Eastern systems also have their technology for slow unfolding. The meditation
Yes.
process, it's a slow process, so that you don't get hit all at once, and you don't get that with the African stuff.
No,
Uh,
they want it now.
yeah, and I don't know if it's is that good? Maybe for
I
some
just think it,
people, not for others. I don't
I
know.
think that's why they have
I don't know.
selected people. It's like you have to have a strong
You've got to be ready
constitution
for
for
it.
it.
Yeah.
You
What do
know,
you what do you think? What are the selection criteria? Like, what do you think is it that makes them decide?
I think you got to have a strong, like, be able to handle really tough stuff, emotionally and psychologically, and to some extent physically, and have a lot of respect and be willing to. Well, also, you cannot be racist.
Right.
Because
Right.
understanding that there's other cultures are going to be different, and you just need to like be not only okay with it but embrace them,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's not gonna go in your favor.
Right. Right. Otherwise,
Yeah,
why are you even here? Right.
yeah. I don't. I really just get really upset when I read things on Threads and Instagram, and people are like, "Oh, I'm worshiping Oshun now," and it's like, "Are you a priest? No. Are you in the religion? No, I'm Wiccan, but I really love Oshun,
Right.
and I made this pink altar. Okay, she doesn't like pink. Her color's yellow. Well, I don't like yellow. Okay, well, you can't make her like pink.
Right.
Barbie, you know.
This is amazing. Like
Oshun's easily offended. Don't do that.
this is so fun. Like Gen Z people are too irrational even for spirits. They're too irrational. Even the occult, even spirits are fed up with Gen Z. They're just like,
No wonder that we're not getting as many new recruits in Lukumi.
really funny. That's really funny. It's also not funny, but it's you gotta laugh, I guess.
You have to wash dishes.
Right. Yeah. Um, washing dishes. Wait, washing dishes wait, tell me about the washing dishes thing.
Well, I mean, you're feeding lots of people usually at a lot of these celebrations, so there's going to be dishes.
It's not a natural thing. It just happens a lot.
It happens, and
Yeah.
you know what? Someone jokingly asked last week on Threads, they're like, what's the best witch advice you'd give to a new witch or magical practitioner?" I said, "Learn how to clean and wash dishes."
That's hilarious.
And all these people are like, "Oh my God, yes, so much cleaning, no matter what your tradition."
That's hilarious. It was like, Jen, I lived with or around, Genesis and Jackie for 7 years. And that was a Santeria house. I mean, they had, I don't know, do you know Bob Morel Canizares?
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they were big in with him. They were big in, and he lived with them for shortly before I did. And so like he was like, he was killing chickens in the basement. Luckily,
Mm-hmm.
not at the same time I was there. but he was a train wreck and a junkie and loved Red Boys and a little too much and all this. So, um, but why the fuck did I get on that topic? Oh, but yeah, they basically had a house, and so like as soon as I was there, it's clean dishes. All that I was ever doing was cleaning dishes. But
Mm-hmm.
that's actually really funny that you bring this up because it's yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter what your tradition is. There's always people who are going to clean up afterwards, and then you get other people who try and skate out of it, right?
Well,
We're just
that also tell you a lot about a person, right? Now that I'm thinking about it from the other side, it's like, yeah, that's a pretty good way to gauge. That's actually a perfect way to gauge if somebody's going to be someone you want to be around or not.
yeah. It reminded me of a book I read a long time ago when I was first getting into like occult stuff. I think it might even have been uh Intero Alley's Undoing Yourself or something like that. And they said like only 1% of you will be able to do this. Start this meditation now and put this book down for the next 3 months. Do not read one more word. Only 1% of you can do it. And I'm like, I did it.
Well, just not reading the book, or
Yeah, just stop reading the book and just do this meditation for the next 3 months, then come back to the book.
what was the meditation?
It was real simple one, basically just a breath one. But the idea was he wanted to see if you had the discipline to say, okay, no, I'm not going to read ahead. I will stop and I will do
Yeah,
this. And he said only 1% of people will be able to do it. And those are the ones that would keep going. So I disciplined myself to do it. And, certainly doing things like that made it easier for me to go through a year in white, in Western executive culture and deal with it.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important skill, one that I possibly wish I could improve more. But like that, it's a really important skill in the occult, which is constraining yourself. It's like picking one thing to do instead of going back to like reading all the shit again and like research, and
Mhm.
picking one thing and sticking with it. And this is a really important skill now because we have access to as much information as we could ever want.
And to what you were saying earlier about Gen Z, I think part of it isn't their fault. I think part of it is just the American culture is so ADHD on its own. We're constantly assaulted with messages and
Yeah.
conflicting things that you can't help but have too many things coming at you. Whereas, like when I was a kid in the '70s growing up, the only books I had available were Sybil Leek's Diary of a Witch and the first book I ever found, which was uh, Lady Sheba's Book of Shadows. And then later I found all these other ones, but those two got me going for a long time. Then I found Robert Anton Wilson and a bunch of other shit, and it all
Yeah.
exploded. But I just stuck with those two for so long.
That's
And
great. Yeah, it's like it actually means something, when it's scarce. It's just supply and demand, Now it's like we got infinite supply. It's like even me now, I've got like a whole library of books. I've got a hard drive with terabytes of occult PDFs. Like I talk to occult people with experiences and opportunities and access to paths that would never have access to almost every week. I've got infinite, opportunities, and here I am laying down playing PlayStation, because it's too overwhelming. And it's just like, you know what I mean? And it's just like,
but
okay.
there's a place for that too. I mean, you do need time for your brain to just like do nothing and do
Oh, no,
something.
that's very true. Yeah,
You know,
I'm a big believer in that as well. That's really knowing when to stop is really knowing when to rest is really important to let your brain consolidate.
hmm
And I've been really working on um, um, smoking as much weed as humanly possible so that I can sleep better at night, which helps my brain consolidate 40 years of nonsense. But well, why did I say that? Speaking of smoking too much weed, why did I say that? I don't know. I can't remember anymore. Uh, I forget what I was, but I forget what I was saying.
you're talking about taking in too many books and
Oh
not.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, that skill of constraining yourself to one practice is
Mhm.
for me is tough, but it really that because we used to have the problem like you're saying where we didn't have the information, and so
Right.
I don't know about you, but I'm pretty hardwired to constantly look for more and more information.
I do. I'm a reader. Uh,
Yeah, and there's a point where that becomes the same. I think there's a point. I started, I think, particularly when I was doing long meditations. There's a point where that starts to become a kind of form of greed, like
Mhm.
intellectual greed, where it's the
Mhm.
same as class grasping at Maya, the things of Maya, but it's happening on the mental plane. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, now I'm a nice, peaceful, meditating person, but my mind is constantly trying to acquire, is greedy, is constantly want more and more and more and more, which of course prevents it from dwelling in its own nature, which is kind of the point. So, at least of the meditation tradition. So,
I used to be a professor, and I had one student in my class who was from China, and he said the thing that really bothered him about the United States was, he goes, you guys have access literally to every single newspaper in the world in some of your bigger bookstores, and you don't read any of them.
yeah.
And in China, we can get killed for reading the wrong newspaper, literally killed.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
He goes, we're dying for any information over there. And I was like, that just made my head explode for the longest time. And I was like,
Right.
telling me that. It never occurred to me.
Yeah. You read about experiences like, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, people like that growing up in the Sudan, where it's just like, reality is whatever the local mom tells you, and that's it. And if you disagree, you're dead. And, whatever the local mom tells you could just be like what one local small town asshole feels that day,
Oh, yeah.
So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, you come here and everyone's miserable. It's like, what the heck?
The terrorists that attacked the buildings, none of that, they were all illiterate. They've never read the Quran. They've had it told to them. And I'm sure it was spun, and I'm sure the part that they spun the most was, look, when you die, you're going to have all these virgins and everything. And it's like, that's a much better life than you have now, right? You're starving to death.
Right. Yeah, it's a
I don't,
pretty good sales pitch.
yeah.
Think about it in advertising
Your country
terms.
will view you as a hero. Like how,
If you just think about that as an advertising campaign, that's pretty good. I mean, but literally, like, of all people, you can probably appreciate this.
oh yeah,
I look at
absolutely.
religions as marketing strategies. You know what I mean? So, um, but yeah, that's a hell of a sales pitch for somebody who doesn't really have anything to live for and may never, is certainly not gonna 72 virgins sounds pretty good to somebody who probably lives in a village
Mhm.
or they're being sexually abused as young boys are over there. If you look at the Bachabazi, at least in Afghanistan, I don't want to talk about
And no food,
it's
starving.
horrible shit. And and it's like that's a pretty good, what? It's like young men are wired to kill and die anyways. So it's not that hard of a sales pitch. And yeah, but it also gives us a bit of insight into our history, I think, in the sense of where you pre-Reformation, when people didn't have access to, the idea of, it's like if, the idea of, if there was the idea in the Middle East that like you can interpret the Quran for yourself, which is what we got in the Reformation. I mean, things would change, but that's clearly not what's going on.
How many Christians do you know that actually know the Bible, as opposed to how well atheists know the Bible?
Right. Or Satanists, often know it the best. But yeah, I know it's like it's so crazy. Like you go, it's like Christianity, but then you go and it's just like we're praying for, it's like the Joel Osteen version where they're like, praying for cars and things like that. It's really bizarre.
Jesus wants me to have that extra jet.
He does. Yeah, particularly, and he wants you to have it tax free because you're a religion.
Right.
Yeah. Which is a good scam. All right. Well, this has been a great podcast. We covered a lot of territory. I feel like
Yeah, we did.
but it's actually we're way past the 2 hour mark. But this is a great show. Tell people where they can find out more about you, and if the deck's out now, I hope where they can get it.
So pretty much, I've had the name Davezilla online for a long time, to the point where there's a Wikipedia page about me, and I'm a verb in the Urban Dictionary, so I'm pretty easy to find. And you can find my deck on Wiser, redwheelwiser.com, or their website is already pre-ordering it. It'll be available August 5th. So I only have my one advanced copy right now, so I can't send some out in advance. But I mean,
people can pre-order now, right?
People can pre-order. Yep.
Awesome.
And I'll definitely send you one of the existing
that'd be great.
decks. Yeah, so
that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. But that one's no longer for sale. So start pushing so Wiser Books, they're huge, and they're going to have it for sale everywhere. It'll be on it. It's already you can pre-order it on Amazon too.
Awesome. Well, it looks awesome, and so I recommend the pre-order. And thank you very much for being on the show.